CR1 was to rescind all amendments going forward. Let me tell you a reason why. There are no rules in place whatsoever on a Constitution amendment or articles that go forward. Even though it takes 34 states to put this together, it'll take another 38. In my belief, if you cannot get them to support the laws of the land now in the Constitution, what makes anyone think that our Congress will comply with the Constitution? Now, I myself, for the last 8 years, I have the same books that I carry on the New Hampshire and the New Hampshire U.S. Constitution. Why? Because I, unlike many others, a little slower, and I can't remember verbatim, and in my committee, constitutional issues come up many times. We must take a stand. If you follow the money trail on this here, you will see a lot of money's coming into New Hampshire. George Soros, with his Wolfpack group out of Connecticut and other areas for many years, are trying to push for this constitutional convention. We do not want any changes in the Constitution. Get them to comply with what we have today, and we'll be a better off country than we want to let these progressives pushing us around. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Baldessaro. I'd like to invite New Hampshire Firearms Coalition, Alan Rice, to just give a few words.
Thank you, Representative, and I want to thank all of you for sponsoring this. It's a very important resolution. The New Hampshire Firearms Coalition strongly supports the resolution that Representative Baldessaro just spoke about and is co-sponsoring. It's real simple. It doesn't need a lot of elocution. The founders got it right. They did a real good job, and it's mighty presumptuous of a bunch of people in modern America to tinker with it. The Constitution works. It works well. You just need to follow it, and I think that's the message that needs to get through to the federal legislators. They need to follow it. We do a better job of it here in New Hampshire because of people like Representative Baldessaro. When some of his colleagues stray, he pulls out his book and pulls them back on the road. There's no need for a convention. It's not warranted, and New Hampshire Firearms Coalition is committed to supporting this resolution. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I'd like to invite Janine Notta, the sponsor of the bill, who will introduce Hal Shurtleff, who will be the main speaker for this event. Representative Notta, would you introduce Hal?
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm sponsoring this legislation for the reasons that you already heard Representative Baldessaro say and what you're going to hear from Hal Shurtleff, who I've known for a number of years. We go back, I don't even know how, before I had my last child. So this is Hal Shurtleff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Thank you. Thank you for members of the media. We were here last year about this time, and we only had one person from the media show up, and he's not here yet. So this issue has gained a lot of momentum in the last year or so. And I just want to give you a quick little overview. Article 5 of the Constitution, part we're dealing with, is where 3/4 of the states propose resolutions or pass resolutions calling for an Article 5 convention. It's been referred to as a CONCON, a Conference of the States, and numerous other things. But we're talking about an Article 5 convention. We've never had one in the history of our nation, for very good reason. We've had up to 600 resolutions that have been introduced. In fact, before the ink was dry in the first Constitution, we had a resolution introduced. I think it was the state of New York. So they're not new. This is not new. And the issue and the facts that we present are not new facts. It's the same old facts that we presented back in 1988 and back in 1982. And last year when we testified against the Wolfpack resolution, and no doubt what we're going to present at the hearings dealing with HCR 2 and 3, which are resolutions calling for an Article 5 convention. Right now, they're about getting back to the 2/3. Now, some of the folks on the pro Article 5 side say that you have nothing to worry about. Even if the convention goes astray a little bit, it still takes 38 states, a supermajority of the states. However, Congress can change the mode of ratification to a ratifying committee, state ratifying conventions. And you don't think special interest groups will be up to their eyeballs on that. And they'll say that states will never do anything crazy or unreasonable. Well, the Wolfpack supporters said that at the hearing last year, that no states would do anything crazy. Well, what does that mean? That's subjective. You know, there might be something that I would support that would be, to a progressive, unthinkable, and vice versa. Not only that, but the first precedent, we've only had one convention under the Articles of Confederation, and Article 13 of that document said that you have to have unanimous consent. So the delegates at the original convention, and I'm very glad we got what we got, they said that we'll change the mode to simply 3/4 instead of majority. Could a potential convention change the mode of the number of ratification? We don't know. It's possible. This is a sovereign entity. And a few weeks ago, there was a debate in Boston, and the Article 5 presenter, a very nice guy, a very sincere patriot, said, we need to have a discussion. This isn't a discussion group, folks. This is a sovereign body that will propose amendments to a constitution, profound amendments, profound changes. Now, one of the big organizations is the Convention of States, and they're here, a few of their delegates are here. And I agree with a lot they have to say about the federal runaway government. I agree with that. But they forget, they look at the states, and the states are also in league to this runaway federal government. Just look at Common Core. You had hearings a little while ago. All 50 states adopted Common Core, folks. Where are all these red conservative states? And yet, I don't know how the hearings are going to come out. You probably will have trouble getting rid of it here, because the federal government went right to the states and promised them lots of money. The remedy is stop taking the money. Give the money back. You don't have to take all the federal money. Federal money means federal control. And I'd like to see more states do that. Now, we're told that, I got an email from Mark Meckler. He's the head of the Convention of States. He made a case against his own proposal. He said, we have more self-governance types in Congress. We have now controlled the U.S. Senate. We now control the House of Representatives. We've had control. And we have control of 2/3 of the houses in various state houses. Well, then just propose amendments. Propose bills that will restore our level of government. That makes it that simple. Now, the left-wing side and the right-wing side, the so-called, are working very hard together. Back in September 2011, they formed there was a group. I was an attendee as a media representative. It was called Conference on the Constitutional Convention. That was their term, CONCON. Mr. Mark Meckler, who is now went on to form the Convention of States, and Larry Lessig. Professor Lessig has been very busy. He's here in New Hampshire quite a bit. There's a march going on through the state right now. He's involved in that. He formed Call a Convention, a coalition, which includes groups like Wolfpack and groups like Convention of States. A coalition is when two or more groups work together for a common cause. There have been historically groups on both sides of the spectrum for and against an Article 5 from the very beginning. Back in the early part of the last century, late part of the last century, I should say 1890s, the so-called progressives were pushing the 17th Amendment, which did away with the direct election of senators. And in the 80s, you had more conservatives pushing for a balanced budget amendment. And let me address the balanced budget amendment really quickly. I'm all in favor of a balanced budget amendment. I don't think anyone who considers himself a fiscal conservative would be against one. But we need a constitutional budget. Right? Congress can print more money, right? They can raise taxes. How about a VAT tax? Right? So if we don't have a constitutional budget, we're going to have these runaway deficits. So you can balance the budget by borrowing money. That's what we do. In fact, as Bill McNally pointed out numerous times at hearings, that there's a public law in the books already, back in 1981, that calls for a balanced budget. So we do balance the budget. We just borrow tons and tons of money and let the next generation worry about it, the next two generations worry about it. So that's with the balanced budget. Term limits. I'm in favor of term limits at the ballot box every 2 years. Because you see, you can have you can term limit somebody out, but if you don't change the perspective of the voter, you're going to get a person just like the person just replaced. Now, I live in Massachusetts. We get Ed Markey as member of the U.S. Senate.
Yay.
That's not much of an improvement. So yeah, so someone had to step down, and you had an open seat to get an Ed Markey. The goal is to create an informed electorate, and those informed voters will in turn put the right people and hold them accountable. That's what being a free American is. So right now, the state, we believe there are about 23 live calls for an Article 5 convention. Now, there is some talk about Congress may not acknowledge any call over 7 years. they may not acknowledge any call that's worded differently. That's why you have, I think it's the first time in the United States, in the history of our country, you have two resolutions behind each other calling for different conventions. There's only one Article 5 convention. The notion that Larry Lessig and his group will have their own convention, and then the COS people will have theirs. It's not those folks that call a convention. It's Congress that calls it. And don't think that we can make the rules before we head in. They can make rules, they can shake hands, they can pass laws, but Congress can determine that. In fact, the necessary and proper clause. And they tried to do that on 3 occasions. 1979 was the last time, to my knowledge, they had hearings at the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they passed the bills in the Senate, but they didn't pass in the House. And according to the late Judge Robert Bork, a convention, an Article 5 convention, can ignore any and all laws and rules. And if you folks think it's like playing Russian roulette, who will be the delegates of this convention? You have no idea. What's the process? Again, we could come up with rules. I know that there's been meetings in Mount Vernon a couple of years ago, Indianapolis last year, and I think this late December, I think there was one in the Washington, D.C. area. And you've got these groups of people coming together. We're going to have all these wonderful things in place, but they can all be ignored once the convention sits. So our goal is to rescind. We have one live call in New Hampshire. After 20 years of efforts, and Bill McNally is one of the veterans here, they were able to get, in 2010, get all of the calls rescinded. And then 2012, a call was passed in the House and Senate for a balanced budget amendment. But I say again, the Article 5 doesn't say you can specify the call. It simply says that you propose amendments, plural. So once you get there, you may think you're having a balanced budget, but you may do everything but that, you see. So, and so our goal is to get enough people to understand this. And by the way, 2 o'clock, I'll be giving a little more full-blown presentation at the up in Zalaka House, so you're welcome to come to that. And at this point, I want to turn it back over to Bill. Oh, 2 things, by the way. For all of you here, media, likewise, we have some reprints on the table from our New American magazine. One of them is Working Together to Rewrite the Constitution. And by the way, the term structural change has been used by Mike Farris of Convention of States. They say, we don't have to change the personnel, we have to change the structure. That to me is that's pretty strong stuff. They want to change the structure. And this is a book, an article dealing with the book by Mark Levin, his book Liberty Amendments, which all of you, if you're a member of the House, you probably got a copy of it. They were sent all over the country. And we have a short little CD, which you could play on the way home from this, when you could drive home tonight. It's about 12 minutes long. A couple of legislators from Oklahoma that successfully rescinded all of their state's calls. And there's copies there, too. I'll turn it back over to Bill.
Okay. Thank you, Hal, and thank you, guests, for talking. Let's close, and I'd like to thank the New Hampshire Tea Party Coalition for sponsoring this event, and thank you all for coming. Any questions?
I got one. I have a question. Okay.
Good.
So, in 2012, HCR 40 was passed, calling for the balanced budget amendment. That bill was passed, or that resolution was passed overwhelmingly in the House, so much so that it only required a voice vote. And it passed in the Senate 19-5. So what has happened in those 3 short years that House got it so wrong that we now need to reverse the activity of that House?
2 years prior to that, they rescinded all of their calls by a pretty wide margin.
So the question is, so now you probably voted for it, so tell me
I
what.
can tell you why.
And Rep. Itza was one of the sponsors to rescind the call in 2010. So I can ask you, what happened in the last few years that changed his mind?
I can tell you though, because some of the people that came into the committee and, we were all for it, thinking about it. And then after we realized there's no set rules, the Congress can do anything they want. Then I hear in between, look at the money trail, follow the money trail. We have candidates that are taking money, okay, from these different groups pushing, this here Constitution. Anytime you have a progressive group behind it, something's wrong. When you see somebody like George Soros sticking $33 million to get all these riots going on and start racial wars, if something like this gets passed, it can go off in different directions. With the money to beat the media up, it's a losing battle. Why would we have a system in place now, okay? If we pass a law here in New Hampshire, it's every American's right to take that to court and go after it for constitutionality. And then the Supreme Court will make the decision. Why are we trying to fix something that's not broken when the actual people that we're sending up there need to go? They need to comply with the Constitution and the laws. So I've learned a lot over the years of being on that committee for 8 years. We had a meeting, and I asked you, show me the rules. Show me where they're set in stone, so our two candidates will not go there, and then all of a sudden they go off in different directions. Can't have that.
So can I have a follow-up question? And if you want to know the rules, so, I mean, Hal had mentioned that he was specifically concerned about if Congress calls for ratification of anything that comes out of the convention, it can be ratified either by the state legislatures or Congress can call it to be ratified by a convention in the states. In fact, in 1933, we have the rules, Chapter 110 of the 1933 Code, which specifies exactly how New Hampshire would ratify. So there are some rules out there that we just have to be clear about.
Mhm. Well, right now, they're not.
They're here,
Okay?
right?
You
Yeah.
have them there for New Hampshire.
Right.
Okay? If they voted in Obama twice, I don't have confidence in the system.
Yes.
Yeah, so it seems to me, the argument I'm hearing made here is that there's a process, but we shouldn't follow it. We should just say, well, no, that part of the process isn't meant to be followed.
Well, that question comes up a lot. I get a chance to speak to many people on the Constitution, public venues, and I don't think there's as much of a debate here that there's a lot of constitutional illiteracy in this country. Would you agree with
Amen
that?
to that.
And it's reflected at the ballot box. So the notion that this convention is going to be run by constitutionalists and out of this is going to become something good is wishful thinking at the very least.
So what you're saying is
Now,
because...
just because it's there doesn't mean we have to use it. Congress can declare war. They've only declared war 5 times. Just because they have the right to do something doesn't mean that it should be exercised. See, that's a good argument, but it's not necessarily, just because it's there
Well, I'm not
doesn't mean we
saying
have
it's
to use it.
determinative, but it troubles me to hear those people, and in this case you, who are advocating adherence to the Constitution, saying the process that was built into the Constitution, we just shouldn't use it because we're afraid of what might happen.
Has the Constitution been corrupted in 200 years?
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't the Article 5 process be any less corrupted?
But
If that's
why
gonna be
isn't-
pristine
my
and
response
pure-
to you is, why isn't the Article 5 process, this is Levin's court,
If I
why
may,
isn't the Article 5 process
You're gonna get an
a
opportunity as a
mechanism for
state
correcting that?
representative, Kurt, you're gonna get an opportunity to debate in committee. And we're not gonna stand in debate, okay, with another representative. This is for the media.
Okay, fine.
There's a time and a place, we appreciate that.
Okay.
So if the media has any questions or concerns, we'll answer them.
I do have one more. I met my colleague Dan McGonigal. I want to give him a few minutes at the podium. Dan, do you want to come up? Or?
Everybody's willing to,
Yeah.
come on up, man.
He's going to be discussing, one of the premier constitutional scholars is Edwin Vieira, who's no stranger to New Hampshire. He's written extensively on this subject, so he's going to come up and just discuss that a little bit. If we can indulge you for a few more minutes.
Thank you, Al. Green Fintro, Dan McGonigal from Boston. I have a lot of experience in lobbying legislators. Defeated one of the worst bills to ever go through the Massachusetts State House in 2009, after it had passed the state Senate unanimous 36-0. And I'm a self-taught constitutional scholar. After being introduced to Dr. Edwin Vieira Jr. in 2008, who is the undisputed top constitutional scholar in America. What I wanted to let you folks know about is there's a couple of articles on News with Views by Dr. Vieira, and Dr. Vieira is in concurrence with the John Birch Society and the New American Magazine in the various articles written and reprinted from the New American Magazine. And one of the articles is titled, "Enforcement, Not Amendment is the Answer," regarding a movement for an Article 5. And his second, that was in September 2013. April 2014, he wrote a second article titled, "Article 5 Convention,
a titanic irrelevance. That's Dr. Edwin Vieira Jr., PhD, JD. He's won 3 cases in the United States Supreme Court. I have a packet of these if anybody wants a copy of this slip that has the links to the 2 articles. I'm just going to quote, just one more thing, I'm going to quote one sentence from one of his articles here. Now let me preface that first. The root issue here is enforcement of the Constitution and the lack thereof. It's been going on for a century. It's the early 20th. The issue is not to change our improperly enforced Constitution. Per Article 1, Section 8 in the U.S. Constitution, each state, 50, at this very moment, today, retains reserved powers under the Constitution to execute the laws of both the Union and the states, where the term laws includes the Constitution and Bill of Rights themselves. That's Article 6, Clause 2. This Constitution and the laws made in pursuance thereof are the supreme law. So the Constitution is included in the laws of both the Union and the laws of